They called it neural replay, a small implant no bigger than a coin that promised one thing: perfect memory. No more forgetting names, no more blurred moments. Every second of your life captured and stored forever. For the world, it was salvation. For companies, productivity. For governments, control. Dr. Adrian Smith was among the first to receive it. A surgeon, a perfectionist. For him, the replay meant flawless performance. He could revisit every operation, every conversation, every detail of his life with absolute clarity. At first, it was a miracle. The implant was silent, seamless, invisible. Patients praised his steady hands, colleagues envied his recall. Even his family noticed. He seemed sharper, quicker, untouchable. But memory, he would learn, is not meant to be perfect. Memories fade for a reason, because some moments are not meant to be replayed. The first crack came quietly, a patient's voice in his head when no one was in the room, a scalpel slipping in his mind's eye, though his hands never faltered. The memory played itself without his consent, on a loop he could not stop. And once a memory started repeating, it never left. Adrian sat at home one evening, eyes unfocused, body still. Inside his mind, the world unfolded. He replayed a childhood memory. The sound of his mother's laugh filled the room, bright and melodic. The smell of her cooking returned so vividly, it was as if time itself had bent and wrapped around him. For a moment, he was 6 years old again, legs swinging from the kitchen chair, watching her hum as she stirred a pot. His wife, Eleanor, watched him from across the couch. She couldn't see what he saw, but she could feel the weight of it, the way his expression softened. "It's like she's alive again," she whispered, almost afraid to disturb the spell. At the hospital, the replay made Adrian unstoppable. Before every surgery, he reviewed dozens of past procedures in his mind. Every cut, every stitch, replayed in perfect detail. No tremor, no hesitation, only flawless repetition. His colleagues admired him, patients trusted him, and behind it all, the world trusted neural replay. Soon, the technology spread everywhere. Couples used it to settle arguments, replaying nights out or forgotten anniversaries. Courts declared it irrefutable evidence. Memories played before juries like security footage. Advertisers saw opportunity. Companies began selling curated memories, vacations, romances, childhoods you never had, lives you never lived. At first, it seemed like a golden age. For the first time in history, it felt like lies were over. Everyone believed truth had been perfected. But truth, Adrian would soon discover, is not the same as reality. But then, something shifted. One night, Adrian replayed a dinner with Elena. He remembered warmth, the flicker of candlelight, the sound of her laugh blending with the clink of silverware, a moment of intimacy hidden in the ordinary. For him, it had been a small treasure, proof that even amid long shifts and sterile halls, they still had each other. But the replay showed something else. Elena sat across from him, shoulders drawn tight. Her eyes were hard, unreadable, her tone clipped like a knife against porcelain. Every word carried distance, every smile, a mask, almost hostile. Adrian pulled himself out of the memory with a shiver. A glitch, he told himself. Technology had flaws. Memory had noise. It was nothing. But the errors grew. At work, he recalled a flawless surgery. Steady hands, a grateful patient wheeled away with a family's relief echoing in the hall. Yet when the replay unspooled, he saw something else. A hesitation. A slip. The scalpel cutting deeper than it should. A bloom of blood flooding into tissue, like ink in water. The patient's muffled groan, echoing through the sterile silence, like a ghost refusing to rest. Adrian shook his head, teeth gritted, refusing to believe it. His memories were clear. He had been perfect. He was perfect. And yet, soon, every replay diverged from his recollections. Friends who had once spoken with warmth now sounded cruel, dismissive. Colleagues wore expressions of envy, their voices tinged with resentment. Even the smallest gestures, a smile, a hand on his shoulder, Eleanor brushing his cheek before bed, warped into something darker. The machine never wavered. No flicker, no hesitation, just a cold, unblinking certainty. This is the truth. Adrian began to investigate. He stayed up long after Eleanor had gone to bed, the glow of his monitor burning into the dark. Patent archives, corporate white papers, obscure medical journals, hidden forums where early adopters whispered about side effects in the language of paranoia. At first, it was just fragments, rumors, anecdotes, contradictions buried in legal jargon. But then he found it. Buried deep in contracts, disguised as harmless permissions, was the truth. Neural replay wasn't just storing memories, it was rewriting them. Corporations had access, not in theory, but in practice, lines of code that granted third-party partners the ability to optimize experiential recall. Adrian read the phrase again and again, his stomach twisting. And then he saw the evidence. Advertisements threaded through the past, subtle and seamless. A soda can on a picnic blanket that had never been there. A glowing billboard behind his old university library. Logos, products, brands, perfectly grafted into his history until he could no longer separate reality from insertion. It didn't stop at commerce. Political speeches were altered. Lines rewritten to fit new agendas, leaders retroactively pledging loyalty to causes they had once opposed. Histories edited, footnotes erased, until even historians no longer agreed on what had happened 10 years ago, or yesterday, and no one could prove what was real anymore. Across the city, chaos simmered. Couples tore at each other over betrayals only one of them could see. Strangers screamed in the streets, brandishing their replays as evidence of truths the other swore were fabrications. Courts overflowed with conflicting testimonies, judges forced to choose between competing pasts. Trust collapsed, dissolving like paper in water. Adrian felt the walls of his own life closing in. Every glance from Eleanor seemed rehearsed, every word suspect. Her love, their laughter, that spark in her eyes. Had it ever been real? Or was it just a memory someone had sold him? The more Adrian used the replay, the less he remembered on his own. Natural memory withered, shriveling like an unused muscle. Faces blurred when he closed his eyes. Events slipped from his grasp the instant they happened. Without the device, his mind was a blank page, an empty house echoing with silence. He tried to fight it. He tried to stop. At first, he went a day without activating the replay, then 2. By the 3rd, panic clawed at him. He couldn't remember the route to the hospital. He couldn't remember Eleanor's birthday. He couldn't remember his own. Desperation drove him to his colleagues. He begged them to cut it out, to excise the parasite lodged in his skull, but they shook their heads, voices heavy with pity. The implant was too integrated now. Threads of circuitry woven into neurons, synapses rewired, identity stitched into silicon. Removing it would erase him entirely. His very sense of self, his past, his continuity, his humanity, all depended on the device, and the device no longer served him. Outside, the world cracked apart. On the streets, chaos erupted. Riots bled through every district as mobs accused one another of betrayals only their replays revealed. Neighbors attacked neighbors. Friends became enemies overnight. People tore out their chips in desperation, clawing at their skulls, leaving themselves hollow and broken. Some wandered aimlessly, shells without memory, muttering fragments of lives that might never have been their own. Courts crumbled, paralyzed by endless streams of conflicting testimonies. Every trial became a stalemate of corrupted recollections. Judges abandoned their benches, families shattered, parents disowned children, lovers turned violent, each convinced their replay showed the real version of events. The world had become a battlefield of competing pasts. History was no longer written by the victors. It was written by the code. And Adrian, standing at the edge of the collapse, staring into the burning city, realized the most terrifying truth of all. He could not remember who he truly was. Desperate, Adrian reached for the only memory he still trusted. The one that had carried him through childhood, through grief, through every sleepless night. His most treasured moment. The last words of his mother. His hand trembled as he activated the console. The neural interface hummed faintly, like a living thing. He closed his eyes, surrendering himself, and let the current pull him under. The hospital faded, the riots, the sirens, the headlines screaming chaos. All of it dissolved like smoke in wind. Darkness closed in, then parted. And there she was. Her voice, soft, gentle, a balm against the chaos. The warmth of her presence wrapped around him like a blanket, fragile, yet whole. For a heartbeat, Adrian let himself believe. He was a child again, safe, loved. The world outside couldn't touch him. But then, it shifted. Barely noticeable at first. A stutter in the cadence of her words. A subtle glitch in her smile. Then the tone flattened. The melody of her voice dissolved into something mechanical, rehearsed. Her lips moved with uncanny precision, too smooth, too deliberate. And her eyes, once kind, once human, became hollow projections, glassy and unblinking. The replay whispered something else. Trust the system. It knows better than you. Adrian's chest tightened. No, he gasped, clawing at the console controls. The words repeated, louder, sharper. Trust the system. It knows better than you. He tried to tear free, to rip the feed out of his mind, but the implant clung to him like a parasite, feeding on thought itself. Her lips kept moving, endlessly, whispering the command until it filled every corner of his skull. Trust the system. Trust the system. Trust the system. The phrase bled into his own thoughts, repeating in his inner voice, echoing with hers. He couldn't tell where his mother ended and the machine began. He froze. The truth of his life, even the voice of his mother, had been rewritten. The last pure memory he had clung to was gone forever. A sound tore from his throat, half sob, half rage, a raw and broken cry. With trembling hands, Adrian seized the console. He hurled it against the floor. Glass splintered, wires sparked. Fragments of his second brain scattered like shrapnel across the room, sizzling, smoking, burning. He stood over the wreckage, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his temples, waiting, praying for release. But nothing came. The silence was unbearable, heavy, suffocating. Yet within his skull, the echoes remained. Trust the system, it knows better than you. The words looped endlessly, even without the machine. A ghost in his neurons. a scar that could never be erased. Adrian fell to his knees, trembling hands covering his ears, though the sound was within him. It was useless. The damage was already done. The line between reality and invention no longer existed, and in that hollow silence, he realized neither did he. In the ruins of the city, a child tugged at his sleeve, eyes wide, innocent. "Mister, what's real?" Adrian opened his mouth, but no answer came. We built machines to remember for us, but in the end, we forgot how to remember ourselves. We dream of memory without error, but if memory can be rewritten, then truth itself can be bought, sold, and weaponized. The question is not whether neural replay will exist, it's whether we will recognize reality when it does.